Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We're out in Russell Square. It was a nice day today in London. There are rare days when the sun shines, so we just decided to come out and do our reading in the nature.
Okay, so it's Canto 1, Chapter 12, Text 21.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Text 21. Amongst great bowmen, this child will be as good as Arjuna. He will be as irresistible as fire and as unsurpassable as the ocean. Purport. It's a long purport. In history, there are two Arjunas. One is Kartavira Arjuna, the king of Haya, and the other is the grandfather of the child. Both the Arjunas are famous for their bowmanship, and the child Parikshit is foretold to be equal to both of them, particularly in fighting. A short description of the Pandava Arjuna is given below.
Pandava Arjuna, the great hero of the Bhagavad Gita. He is the Kshatriya son of Maharaj Pandu. Queen Kunti Devi could call for any one of the demigods, and thus she called Indra, and Arjuna was born by him. Arjuna is therefore a plenary part of the heavenly king Indra. He was born in the month of Falgun, February, March, and therefore he is also called Falguni. When he appeared as the son of Kunti, his future greatness was proclaimed by air messages, and all the important personalities from different parts of the universe, such as the demigods, the Gandharvas, the Adityas from the sun globe, the Rudras, the Vasus, the Nagas, the different rishis, sages of importance, and the Apsaras, the society girls of heaven, all attended the ceremony. The Apsaras pleased everyone by their heavenly dances and songs. Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna and the maternal uncle of Arjuna, sent his Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna and the maternal uncle of Arjuna, sent his priest representative Kashyapa to purify Arjuna by all the prescribed samskars or reformatory processes. His samskar of being given a name was performed in the presence of the rishis, residents of the Shatashringa. He married 4 wives, Draupadi, Subhadra, Chitrangada, and Ulupi, from whom he got 4 sons of the names Shrutakirti, Abhimanyu, Babruvahana, and Iravan, respectively. Don't hear much about them, do you? During his student life.
I was just reading his wife's names. It just, because Subhadra is his wife.
Draupadi.
I know, but we've got Subhadra, I'm saying, on the altar. That's his wife.
Subhadra has us.
Yes. During his student life, he was entrusted to study under the great professor Dronacharya, along with other Pandavas and the Kurus. But he excelled everyone by his studious intensity, and Dronacharya was especially attracted by his disciplinary affection. Dronacharya accepted him as a first-grade scholar and loved heartily to bestow upon him all the blessings of military science. He was so ardent a student that he used to practice bowmanship even at night, and for all these reasons Professor Dronacharya was determined to make him the topmost bowman of the world. He passed very brilliantly the examination in piercing the target, and Dronacharya was very pleased. Royal families at Manipur and Tripura are descendants of Arjuna's son, Babruvahana. Arjuna saved Dronacharya from the attack of a crocodile, and the Acharya, being pleased with him, rewarded him with a weapon of the name Brahmasira. Maharaj Draupad was inimical toward Dronacharya, and thus when he attacked the Acharya, Arjuna got him arrested and brought him before Dronacharya. He besieged a city of the name Achitchatra, belonging to Maharaj Draupad, and after taking it over, he gave it to Dronacharya. The confidential treatment of the weapon Brahma Shira was explained to Arjuna, and Dronacharya was promised by Arjuna that he would use the weapon if necessary when he, Dronacharya, personally became an enemy of Arjuna. By this, Acharya forecasted the future battle of Kurukshetra, in which Dronacharya was on the opposite side. Maharaj Draupad, although defeated by Arjuna on behalf of his professor Dronacharya, decided to hand over his daughter Draupadi to his young combatant, but he was disappointed when he heard the false news of Arjuna's death in the fire of a Shalak house, intrigued by Duryodhana. He therefore arranged for Draupadi's personal selection of a groom who could pierce the eye of a fish hanging on the ceiling. This trick was especially made because only Arjuna could do it, and he was successful in his desire to hand over his equally worthy daughter to Arjuna. Arjuna's brothers were at that time living incognito under agreement with Duryodhana, and Arjuna and his brothers attended the meeting of Draupadi's selection in the dress of Brahmanas. When all the Kshatriya kings assembled saw that a poor Brahmana had been garlanded by Draupadi for her lord, Sri Krishna disclosed his identity to Balaram.
He met Ulupi at Haridwar, and he was attracted by that girl belonging to Nagaloka, and thus Iravan was born. Similarly, he met Chitrangada, a daughter of the king of Manipura, and thus Babruvahana was born. Lord Sri Krishna made a plan to help Arjuna to kidnap Subhadra, sister of Sri Krishna, because Baladev was inclined to hand her over to Duryodhana. Yudhisthira also agreed with Sri Krishna, and thus Subhadra was taken by force by Arjuna and then married to him. Subhadra's son, Abhimanyu, the father of Parikshit Maharaj, the posthumous child, Arjuna satisfied the fire god by setting fire to the Khandava forest, and thus the fire god gave him one weapon. Indra was angry when the fire was set in the Khandava forest, and thus Indra, assisted by all other demigods, began fighting with Arjuna for his great challenge. They were defeated by Arjuna, and Indradev returned to his heavenly kingdom. Arjuna also promised all protection to one Mayasura, and the latter presented him one valuable conch shell celebrated as the Devadatta. Similarly, he received many other valuable weapons from Indradev when he was satisfied to see his chivalry.
When Maharaj Yudhishthira was disappointed in defeating the king of Magadha, Jarasandh, it was Arjuna only who gave King Yudhishthira all kinds of assurances. And thus Arjuna, Bhima and Lord Krishna, started for Magadha to kill Jarasandh. When he went out to bring all other kings of the world under the subjection of the Pandavas, as was usual after the coronation of every emperor, he conquered the country named Kelinda and brought in subjugation King Bhagadatta. Then he travelled through countries like Antagiri, Ulukapura and Modapura and brought under subjugation all the rulers.
Sometimes he underwent severe types of penances, and later on he was rewarded by Indradev. Lord Shiva also wanted to try the strength of Arjuna, and in the form of an aborigine, Lord Shiva met him. There was a great fight between the two, and at last Lord Shiva was satisfied with him and disclosed his identity. Arjuna prayed to the Lord in all humbleness, and the Lord, being pleased with him, presented him the Pashupata weapon. He acquired many other important weapons from different demigods. He received Dandastra from Yamaraj, Pashastra from Varun, and Antardanastra from Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly kingdom. Indra wanted him to come to the heavenly kingdom, the Indraloka planet beyond the moon planet. In that planet he was cordially received by the local residents, and he was awarded reception in the heavenly parliament of Indradev. Then he met Indradev, who not only presented him with his Vajra weapon, but also taught him the military and musical science, as used in the heavenly planet. In one sense, Indra is the real father of Arjuna, and therefore indirectly he wanted to entertain Arjuna with the famous society girl of heaven, Urvashi, the celebrated beauty. The society girls of heaven are lusty, and Urvashi was very eager to contact Arjuna, the strongest human being. She met him in his room and expressed her desires, but Arjuna sustained his unimpeachable character by closing his eyes before Urvashi, addressing her as mother of the Kuru dynasty, and placing her in the category of his mothers Kunti, Madri, and Sachi Devi, wife of Indradev. Disappointed, Urvashi cursed Arjuna and left. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Disappointed, Urvashi cursed Arjuna and left. In the heavenly planet, he also met the great celebrated ascetic Lamosha and prayed to him for the protection of Maharaj Yudhisthira.
When his inimical cousin Duryodhana was under the clutches of the Gandharvas, he wanted to save him and requested the Gandharvas to release Duryodhana, but the Gandharvas refused, and thus he fought with them and got Duryodhana released. When all the Pandavas lived incognito, he presented himself in the court of King Virata as a eunuch and was employed as the musical teacher of Uttara, his future daughter-in-law, and was known in the Virat court as the Brihannala. As Brihannala, he fought on behalf of Uttara, the son of King Virat, and thus defeated the Kurus in the fight incognito. His secret weapons were safely kept in the custody of a Somi tree, and he ordered Uttara to get them back. His identity and his brother's identity were later on disclosed to Uttara. Dronacharya was informed of Arjuna's presence in the fight of the Kurus and the Viratas. Later, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna killed many great generals like Karna and others. After the battle of Kurukshetra, he punished Ashwatthama, who had killed all the 5 sons of Draupadi. Then all the brothers went to Bhishmadev.
It is due to Arjuna only that the great philosophical discourses of the Bhagavad Gita were again spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. His wonderful acts on the battlefield of Kurukshetra are vividly described in the Mahabharata. Arjuna was defeated, however, by his son Babhuvahana at Manipur and fell unconscious when Ulupi saved him. After the disappearance of Lord Krishna, the message was brought by Arjuna to Maharaj Yudhisthira. Again, Arjuna visited Dwarka, and all the widow wives of Lord Krishna lamented before him. He took them all in the presence of Vasudeva and pacified all of them. Later on, when Vasudeva passed away, he performed his funeral ceremony in the presence of Krishna. While Arjuna was taking all the wives of Krishna to Indraprastha, he was attacked on the way and could not protect the ladies in his custody. At last, advised by Vyasadeva, all the brothers headed by Vyasadeva, all the brothers headed for Mahaprasthana. On the way, at the request of his brother, he gave up all important weapons as useless, and he dropped them all in the water.
Text 22. This child will be as strong as a lion and as worthy a shelter as the Himalaya mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth and as tolerant as his parents. Purport. One is compared to the lion when one is very strong in chasing an enemy. One should be a lamb at home and a lion in the chase.
Wow. That's where it comes from.
The lion never fails in the chase of an animal. Similarly, the head of the state should never fail in chasing an enemy. The Himalaya mountains are famous for all richness. There are innumerable caves to live in, numberless trees of good fruits to eat, good springs to drink water from, and profuse drugs and minerals to cure diseases. Any man who is not materially prosperous can take shelter of these great mountains, and he will be provided with everything required. Both the materialist and the spiritualist can take advantage of the great shelter of the Himalayas. On the surface of the earth, there are so many disturbances caused by the inhabitants. In the modern age, the people have begun to detonate atomic weapons on the surface of the earth. and still the earth is forbearing to the inhabitants, like a mother who excuses a little child. Parents are always tolerant to children for all sorts of mischievous acts. An ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities, and the child Pariksha is foretold to have all these qualities in perfection.
Text 23. This child will be like his grandfather Yudhisthira or Brahma in equanimity of mind. He will be munificent like the Lord of the Kailash hill, Shiva. And he will be the resort of everyone like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, who is even the shelter of the Goddess of Fortune. Purport. Mental equanimity refers both to Maharaj Yudhisthira and to Brahma, the grandfather of all living beings. According to Sridhar Swami, the grandfather referred to is Brahma, but according to Vishwanath Chakravarti, the grandfather is Maharaj Yudhisthira himself. But in both cases, the comparison is equally good because both of them are recognized representatives of the Supreme Lord, and thus both of them have to maintain mental equanimity, being engaged in the welfare work for the living being. Any responsible executive agent at the top of administration has to tolerate different types of onslaughts from the very persons for whom he works. Brahmaji was criticized even by the gopis, the highest perfectional devotees of the Lord. The gopis were dissatisfied with the work of Brahmaji because Lord Brahma, as creator of this particular universe, created eyelids which obstructed their seeing Lord Krishna. They could not tolerate a moment's blinking of the eyes, for it kept them from seeing their beloved Lord Krishna. So what to speak of others who are naturally very critical of every action of a responsible man? Similarly, Maharaj Yudhisthira had to cross over many difficult situations created by his enemies, and he proved to be the most perfect maintainer of mental equanimity in all critical circumstances. Therefore, the example of both grandfathers for maintaining equanimity of mind is quite fitting. Interesting point, though, that it says that Sridhar Swami says Brahma, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says Yudhisthira, so there's a difference of opinion amongst the acharyas and their commentaries, but actually Prabhupada says the point is still the same. It doesn't matter if it's Brahma or Yudhisthira, equanimity of mind is the point, and that's required by both of them, and then he explains why. So we can get caught up so much in these little details, but the details are not necessarily the point. The principle is the point, and the principle is equanimity of mind. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you can see like whole riffs get created because, oh no, it's this name, no, it's that name, oh no, it's just, did a Waitacharya have a beard? No, he didn't have a beard. Oh, there's a whole thing, So whatever it is, people get all upset.
Lord Shiva is a celebrated demigod who awards gifts to beggars. His name is therefore Ashutosh, the one who is pleased very easily. He is also called the Bhutanat, or the Lord of the common folk, who are mainly attached to him because of his magnificent gifts, even without consideration of the after effects. Ravan was so attached to Lord Shiva, and by easily pleasing him, Ravan became so powerful that he wanted to challenge the authority of Lord Ram. Of course, Ravan was never helped by Lord Shiva when he fought with Ram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Lord of Lord Shiva. To Vrikasura, Lord Shiva awarded a benediction which was not only awkward but also disturbing. Vrikasura became empowered by the grace of Lord Shiva to vanish anyone's head simply by touching it. Although this was awarded by Lord Shiva, the cunning fellow wanted to make an experiment of the power by touching the head of Lord Shiva. Thus the Lord had to take shelter of Vishnu to save himself from trouble, and the Lord Vishnu, by his illusory potency, asked Vrikasura to make an experiment with his own head. The fellow did it and was finished himself. And so the world was saved from all sorts of trouble by such a cunning beggar of the demigods. The excellent point is that Lord Shiva never denies anyone any sort of gift. He is therefore the most generous, although sometimes some kind of a mistake is made.
Rama means the goddess of fortune, and her shelter is Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the maintainer of all living beings. There are innumerable living beings, not only on the surface of this planet, but also in all other hundreds of thousands of planets. All of them are provided with all necessities of life for the progressive march towards the end of self-realization. But on the path of sense gratification, they are put into difficulty by the agency of Maya, the illusory energy, and so travel the path of a false plan of economic development. Such economic development is never successful because it is illusory. These men are always after the mercy of the illusory goddess of fortune, but they do not know that the goddess of fortune can live only under the protection of Vishnu. Without Vishnu, the goddess of fortune is an illusion. We should therefore seek the protection of Vishnu instead of directly seeking the protection of the goddess of fortune. Only Vishnu and the devotees of Vishnu can give protection to all. And because Maharaj Parikshit was himself protected by Vishnu, remember his name is Vishnu Rata, it was quite possible for him to give complete protection to all who wanted to live under his rule.
Text 24. This child will be almost as good as Lord Sri Krishna by following in his footsteps. In magnanimity, he will become as great as King Rantidev, and in religion, he will be like Maharaj Yayati. Purport. The last instruction of Lord Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is that one should give up everything and should follow in the footsteps of the Lord alone. Less intelligent persons do not agree to this great instruction of the Lord, as ill luck would have it. But one who is actually intelligent catches up this sublime instruction and is immensely benefited. Foolish people do not know that association is the cause of acquiring qualities. Association with fire makes an object hot, even in the material sense. Therefore, association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead makes one qualified like the Lord. As we have discussed previously, one can achieve 78% of the godly qualities by the Lord's intimate association. To follow the instructions of the Lord is to associate with the Lord. The Lord is not a material object whose presence one has to feel for such association. The Lord is present everywhere and at all times. It is quite possible to have his association simply by following his instruction, because the Lord and his instruction and the Lord and his name, fame, attributes and paraphernalia are all identical. With him being absolute knowledge, Maharaj Parikshit associated with the Lord even from the womb of his mother up to the last day of his valuable life, and thus he acquired all the essential good qualities of the Lord in all perfection.
Rantidev, an ancient king prior to the Mahabharata period, referred to by Narada Muni while instructing Sanjay as mentioned in the Mahabharata. He was a great king, liberal for hospitality and distribution of foodstuff. Even Lord Sri Krishna praised his acts of charity and hospitality. He was blessed by the great Vashishta Muni for supplying him cold water, and thus he achieved the heavenly planet. He used to supply fruits, roots, and leaves to the rishis, and thus he was blessed by them with fulfillment of his desires. Although a Kshatriya by birth, he never ate flesh in his life. He was especially hospitable to Vashishta Muni, and by his blessings only he attained the higher planetary residences. He is one of the pious kings whose names are remembered in the morning and evening.
Yayati, the great emperor of the world and the original forefather of all great nations of the world, who belong to the Aryan and Indo-European stock. He is the son of Maharaj Nahusa, and he became emperor of the world due to his elder brothers becoming a great and liberated saintly mystic. He ruled over the world for several thousands of years and performed many sacrifices and pious activities recorded in history, although his early youth was very lustful and full of romantic stories. He fell in love with Devyani, the most beloved daughter of Sukracharya. Devyani wished to marry him, but at first he refused to accept her because of her being a daughter of a Brahmana. According to Sastras, a Brahmana could marry the daughter of a Brahmana. They were very much cautious about Varna Shankara population in the world. Sukracharya amended this law of forbidden marriage and induced Emperor Yayati to accept Devyani. Devyani had a girlfriend named Samishta. Oh, this is a funny pastime. who also fell in love with the emperor and thus went with her friend Devayani. Sukracharya forbade Emperor Yayati to call Shamishta into his bedroom, but Yayati could not strictly follow his instructions. He secretly married Shamishta also and begot sons by her. When this was known by Devayani, she went to her father and lodged a complaint. Yayati was much attached to Devayani, and when he went to his father-in-law's place to call her, Sukracharya was angry with him and cursed him to become impotent. Yayati begged his father-in-law to withdraw his curse, but the sage asked Yayati to ask youthfulness from his sons and let them become old as a condition of his becoming potent. He had 5 sons, 2 from Devayani and 3 from Shamishta. From his 5 sons, named Yadu, Turvasu, Druhu, Anu and Puru, 5 famous dynasties, namely the Yadu dynasty, the Yavana, the Turk dynasty, the Bodja dynasty, the Malecha dynasty, Greek and Purava dynasty, all emanated to spread all over the world. He reached the heavenly planets by dint of his pious acts, but he fell down from there because of his self-advertisement and criticizing other great souls. After his fall, his daughter and grandson bestowed upon him their accumulated virtues, and by the help of his grandson and friend Sibi, he was again promoted to the heavenly kingdom, becoming one of the assembled members of Yamaraj, with whom he is staying as a devotee. He performed more than 1,000 different sacrifices, gave in charity very liberally, and was a very influential king. His majestic power was felt all over the world. His youngest son agreed to award him his youthfulness when he was troubled with lustful desires, even for 1,000 years. Finally, he became detached from worldly life and returned the youthfulness again to his son Puru. He wanted to hand over the kingdom to Puru, but his noble men and the subjects did not agree. But when he explained to his subjects the greatness of Puru, they agreed to accept Puru as the king, and thus Emperor Yayati retired from family life and left home for the forest.
Is that it?
Yes. We're now going to leave the forest and go home as well.
Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
jai.
Hari Bol.